Hello everyone and welcome back to Market Insights, a series where we delve into interesting topics affecting equity markets. Today I have with me Jacques and Cornelius again. Thank you guys for being here. So manufacturing used to be quite a large part of the US economy, and we've seen that shift into services. Has this hurt or helped the economy?
So looking at global manufacturing, China currently accounts for more than 30% of global manufacturing, while the US used to be 25%, and that has decreased to 15% at the moment. We think this change does make sense as the US has moved up the value chain and become more of a services and consumption-based economy. Looking at the US specifically, and given the greater openness of economies since World War II, the US trade as a percentage of their GDP has gone from 10% in 1947 to a peak of 30% following the global financial crisis, and it's currently around 25% of US activity. So trade has peaked with globalization more than a decade ago, and the US is actually quite a closed economy compared to other major world economies. And this is what's giving Trump the confidence at the moment to increase tariffs.
Great, thank you, Jacques. And following on from that, how do you think that the current trade war will affect the US economy versus US equity markets?
The equity market at the moment is also not priced for a recession, trading on a 20 times forward multiple with an average around 17 times forward. And we know that markets typically don't bottom at the average multiple. So with margins potentially under pressure and a slowdown in the economy, if this stagflationary environment turns into a recession, we think there's downside to the market.
The other consideration is that if the US economy enters a recession, the forward earnings estimates are too optimistic, and the current 21 times price earnings ratio is likely overstated. So there's at least 20% downside if we do hit a recession in the US. The US market peaked 14 Feb and within 3 weeks sold off 21%. Since then, it has snapped back 15%, so it's only down 9% from the highs. And it will be the shortest bear market that we've seen. Typically, a bear market lasts for 9 months and not 1 month. And the median drawdown is 26% versus the current 21%. But there's a lot of uncertainty. Trump has backpedaled on some of his announcements, and we'll have to see how it plays out.
So following on from the drawdown, Trump and Besant have made mention that they're willing to take on some short-term volatility in the markets in order to do what's right for the majority of the population. And this brings in the topic of Main Street versus Wall Street. Could you maybe give me some insights on your thinking here?
Yeah, so Scott Besant said or highlighted the fact that 10% of the US population owns 87 to 90% of the equity market. So the pain that we are experiencing in the equity market is quite isolated, and they want to do the right thing for the economy. And what this misses is the fact that that 10% is responsible for 50% of US consumption. So if they're experiencing a negative wealth effect, there will be secondary impact on the global economy or on the US economy. So you can't really split the two in a financialized economy like the US.
So we've seen a huge buildup of wealth in the US. What is the risk of this reversing, and how does this affect the broader economy?
So financial markets hates uncertainty, and we've seen uncertainty around policy reach all-time highs. So the impact of the back and forth on the tariffs will definitely have a negative impact on equity markets. They are hurting the brand of US markets. The US markets have attracted a lot of capital. The market cap in the US has tripled over the last 10 odd years, while Europe and Japan and China has basically gone nowhere. So there is a risk that people will take some profits out of the US, because we know the US makes up 72% of MSCI World these days. And you can also see people diversifying away from US treasuries into gold, especially at a central bank level. And this does pose a risk, as we've discussed, the negative wealth effect. We've seen it illustrated in the Chinese property market bubble, how that has dented consumer confidence and therefore spilled over to the general economy in China. So it is a big risk to monitor, but The US consumers' wealth has grown significantly over the last decade, both on the property side as well as on the equity side. So you probably need a period of sustained weakness before it really filters through the economy. So for now, I think it's something interesting to consider, but not a major thing to worry about.
Brilliant. Thank you guys so much for your time and your insights today. It's been really, really helpful. Please join us on the 15th of May for our Equity Explorer series, where we'll be delving into GLP-1s, specifically focusing on Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly. And if you happen to miss our last session on US housing, feel free to reach out and we'll pop you that recording.